Hi guys, welcome to lecture 4 of our heredity unit. Today we're going to talk about dihybrid crosses. So a dihybrid cross is a cross that is going to predict the outcome of two traits. So when you're doing these, you should expect to see only the traits that show complete dominance in the dihybrid cross. You're not likely going to see dihybrids of traits that have incomplete dominance or codominance. So there's two ways that we can approach dihybrids. So if a question asks what is the probability that a two big T's, big S, little s plant, and a big T, to little s plant has offspring that are tall and wrinkled. So what you're going to do is you're going to use two regular Punnett squares to do that cross. If a question, however, asks what is the phenotypic ratio of the offspring, you're going to do a Punnett square, which would be a 16 square Punnett, just like this one shown here, or you can do a simplified one. So let's look at those. So in pea plants, tall is dominant to short, and smooth seeds are dominant to wrinkled. So what is the phenotypic ratio that results from a cross between two pea plants that are heterozygous for both traits? So what we need to do in order to figure out what to put on our Punnett square is we have got, what do we have here? We've got T, little t, big S, little s, and we are crossing that with big T, little t, big S, and little s. So what you are going to do is, if you remember from math class, I think it's called foiling. Math was not my strong suit. But basically, you're going to figure out all the possible gametes that could come out of this. So you're going to cross this T with this S, and then with this, and this T with this, and this T with that. And you're going to do that on both sides. Okay? So what we end up with big T, big S, big T, little s, little t, big S, and little t, little s. And over here, big T, big S, big T, little s, little t, s, and little t, little s. Okay, so go through and do those crosses and pause just a moment to do that. Okay, so I've typed in here what you should have gotten. So after you get that, what you have to do is figure out the phenotypic frequencies. So we're wanting to know how many are tall, smooth, etc. So what you're going to do is you're going to pause again and go through and mark which ones are tall, which ones are smooth, etc. So for instance, this first one is going to be tall, and it's going to be smooth. So go ahead and do that for the rest of them. Okay, so I went ahead and typed in here what we should have gotten. 9 out of 16 are tall and smooth. 3 out of 16 are tall and wrinkled. 3 out of 16 are short and smooth, and 1 out of 16 are short and wrinkled. So this is an important fact that you should have memorized. Anytime you cross two individuals that are both heterozygous for both traits, you will always get a 9-to-3 to 3-to-1 ratio. There will always be 9 that are dominant, dominant, 3 that are dominant recessive, 3 that are recessive dominant, and 1 that is recessive recessive. So let's move on to another one. So problem 10, determine the phenotypic ratio of the offspring if you cross a heterozygous tall, smooth plant with a plant that is homozygous recessive for both traits. So the first thing that we're going to do is we need to figure out what is our genotype going to be. So we know that they're heterozygous, so we're going to have a T, T, big T, little t, big S, little s, crossed with homozygous recessive for both. So little t, little s, little s. So if you do the cross with this, over here, you should end up with TS, big T, little s, little t, big S, and little t, s. And down here, for this, you should end up with little t, little s, little t, little s, little t, little s, little t, little s, right? So, looking at this, instead of going through and doing all 16 squares, basically, these bottom 3 rows are going to be the exact same as the top row. So we are just not going to even do that. That's just a waste of time and energy. So push pause and figure out this top row. So I went ahead and typed in here what you should get. And when you're looking at this, you should realize that basically this whole row would be the same, or this whole column. This whole column would be the same, etc., going on and on. So now figure out the phenotypic ratios. Go ahead and push pause, and I will type those in. Okay, so our phenotypic frequencies, you should have come up with 1 out of 4 would be tall smooth, 1 out of 4 tall wrinkled, 1 out of 4 short smooth, and 1 out of 4 short wrinkled. So in this instance, we have a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. So, based on what we found out, what is the probability that this cross would produce tall, smooth offspring? And all you're going to do is look at what you figured out. 1 out of 4, that's 25%. And that is your answer. Okay, so the next problem is the same thing, except we are going to do it with 2 regular Punnett squares. So we're going to have the same cross, that big T, big S, little s, and then T, T, S, S. So what we're going to do is we are not going to FOIL like we did before. We're going to have 1 Punnett square for height, and then we're going to have 1 Punnett square for the type of pods. So over here, we will have big T, and then little t, little t. And over here, we'll have big S, little s, and then 2 little s's. So go ahead and push pause and do those crosses. Okay, so you should have come up with these squares. So what it's asking us is, what is the probability of producing tall smooth? So first of all, half of this is going to be tall. Okay? And we know that half of this is going to be smooth. So all you do is multiply that 1/2 by 1/2. So your answer is 1 out of 4, or 25%. Okay, so this next problem, this is an example of where the two Punnett squares is going to be ideal. So, in corn, the trait for tall plants is dominant to the trait for dwarf plants, and the trait for colored kernels is dominant to the trait for white kernels. In a particular cross of corn plants, the probability of an offspring being tall is 1/2, and the probability of a kernel being colored is 3/4. Which of the following most probably represents the parental genotypes? So, based on what we know of our ratios, 1/2, in order to get a 1/2 of the tall, and you can go through and you could try each one of these, but what we know is that in order to get a half, we have to do a heterozygous with a homozygous recessive, right? Because, right there, that's half. And as far as the color goes, 3/4, both would have to be heterozygous for that 3, and these are small, for that 3 to happen because of that dominant C. So there would be our 3 out of 4. So our answer would be A. So problem 13. In a certain pea plant, purple flowers are dominant and white flowers are recessive. Additionally, round leaves are dominant to the pointy leaves. A purple flowered pea plant with round leaves is crossed with a white flowered pea plant with pointy leaves. So A is what is the probability of their offspring being heterozygous for purple flowers. So for A, what we're going to do is we're going to do a Punnett square, and we are only going to look at one trait, because we are looking for the purple flowers, not the shape of the leaves. So the first thing is that they gave us the purple flowered pea plant with round leaves. They did not give us the information about the white flowered pea plant with pointy leaves. So the first thing that we need to do is figure that out. So we know that if it is white, then it's going to be lowercase p, lowercase p. And if it has pointy leaves, it's going to be lowercase r, lowercase r. Okay, so we are going to cross the purple with the white. And we are going to end up with two purple, two white flowers. So what is the probability that of their offspring being heterozygous for purple? That would be these two right here. So the answer would be 50% or 1/2. Okay, so for B, 224 seeds result from the cross. If planted, approximately how many plants should be white flowered with round leaves? Okay, so we already know that half of them are going to be white, right? So now we need to do the cross of the leaves. So we know that our purple flower is dominant, big R, and our white flower is recessive. So if we do that cross, then we know that 100%, 4 out of 4, right? So if we take that 4 out of 4 times the 1/2 for the white, then that gives us 4 out of 8, which is 1/2. So here our answer would be 1/2. So the next thing we're going to look at is trihybrids. So trihybrids, as you probably guessed, these are going to be used to predict the outcome of 3 traits. So in this instance, we're only going to see traits that show complete dominance. Again, you're not going to see traits that show incomplete dominance, codominance, etc. So there are 2 ways to approach. You can use 3 regular Punnett squares, or you can do a 64 square Punnett, or a simplified one if it works out that way. So let's look at problem 14 here. What is the chance that the following 2 parents could produce a child that is big A, little b, little b, little c, little c? So what we're going to do is we are going to use the 3 Punnett squares. And we are going to compare the different traits of each one. So here we would have big A, big A, and then big A, little a. Here we would have big B, little b, crossed with little b, little b. And then here we would have big C, little c, big C, little c. So go ahead and pause a moment and finish those. Okay, so this is what they should look like. So what we're trying to figure out, what is the chance that those parents could produce a child that is big A, little b, little c, little c. So what we're going to do is we are going to figure out how many big A, little a's we have, how many little b's we have, and how many little c's we have. So in this case, we have half over here that are big A, little a, and we have half that are little b, and then we have 1 out of 4 that is little c. So what we're going to do is we are going to multiply all of those, and we will end up with 1/16. Okay, so the law of multiplication. To determine the probability that 2 random events will occur in succession, you need to multiply the probability of the first event by the probability of the second event. So this is what they give you on the AP sheet. Okay? So, for example, a coin. What is the probability that a coin flip will result in heads? Well, we know that it's going to be 50%, right? There's 1 out of 2 chances because there's 2 sides to that coin. So 50%. What is the probability that 2 coins flipped simultaneously will both come up heads? Well, we know that we have a 1/2 chance for that heads. We just talked about that. And the same will be true for the second coin. So we're going to multiply that, and we end up with 1/4, or 25%. So now let's apply it to heredity. So you are heterozygous for a trait. What is your chance of passing the A on? Well, you only have 2 letters here, right? So your chance would be, again, 1/2. If you are big A, big B, little b, what is the chance that you pass both an A and a B on? Well, the same thing. You have 1 out of 2 chances here and 1 out of 2 chances here. So again, that would be 1/2 times 1/2. and that would be 1/4, or 25%. Okay, so here, determine the possible number of gametes produced from a genotype. So here we have 2 R's, 2 big B's, so that's one of the same, 2 C's, 1 D, 2 E. So if you multiply all of those, 2 times 1 times 2 times 1 times 2, then we're looking at 8. So there are 8 possible gametes. When it says a possible number, it's always going to be a whole number. Remember that. So this basically is just showing you, because realistically, you could go through and you could do Punnett squares just like we did before to figure this out. But there is a simpler way to do it. So gamete production and probability. We're going to use the law of multiplication to answer these and determine, first of all, whether or not we should have a fraction or a whole number. So the first thing here is in a diploid organism or diploid organism with the genotype of this, how many genetically distinct kinds of gametes would be produced? And again, we would do the same thing. We have 2 letters here. We have 1, we have 2, we have 1, we have 1. So our answer is going to be 4. Next problem, what is the probability of producing a gamete with an allele combination of A, B, C if the parent has a genotype of this? So the first thing that you need to know is that this says probability. So that means that we are looking for a percent or a fraction. So what we're going to do is here we have 2. So we know that it's going to be 1 out of 2. This, we're going to have 1, and this 1 out of 2. So your answer would be 1/4, or 25%. So the next problem. If one parent is this and another parent is this, how many genetically different zygotes can they produce due to independent assortment of chromosomes? So here we have 1, and we have 2. So we know that that's 2. And here we have 2, we have 2, we have 1. So that's 4. So 2 times 4, our answer would be 8. So make sure that you go back through these questions and you understand them, you can practice, and I will see you next time. Thanks.